here to talk about mental health and ergonomics in the workplace. Because most of the time, when we talk of mental health, we talk of ergonomics, we keep asking ourselves, what's the connection or what's the relationship? So while we go ahead, we'll have a little bit of a food for thought here. And there's the first video. So just to bring our minds into the presentation topic and what we're going to be talking about. So just watch and listen, because most of the time when we talk of mental health, could it be that this is
Hey
what comes
everybody,
to
we
our
know a
mind?
lot of you have been overworked lately with the new project. So for 2025, we'll be doing something brand new to boost employee morale.
Are we hiring more staff?
No.
Are we getting less work?
No.
Are we getting paid more?
Now we go ahead.
That's a good one. I will be hosting a monthly mental health workshop. Yes. Attendance is mandatory through Zoom, but if you have a lot of work to do, you should get back to work.
So now when we think about that if you have a lot of work to do, you should get back to work. And that brings us to ergonomics. Now, when we hear ergonomics, do we think of a chair just like this young man here?
I should buy an ergonomic chair.
So most of the time, when we think of mental health, we think of ergonomics. Are those the two areas that we look at? And that brings us to a survey that was conducted in the UK, according to the health and safety statistics of 2024 to 2025, published by the Health and Safety Executives UK. The following figures were obtained. 1.9 million working people suffering from a work-related illness, of which 964,000 workers suffering work-related stress, depression, or anxiety. So I think that's something for us to also think about. Then while we're also looking at that, we also have 511,000 workers suffering from a work-related musculoskeletal disorder. And we also have 730,000 workers who suffered from new cases of work-related illnesses. So when we think of the work-related illnesses, then that means we think of work-related stress, depression, anxiety, our mind goes straight to mental health. Then we think of work-related MSDs or musculoskeletal disorders, our mind goes to ergonomics. But definitely we'll see as we proceed that there's a relationship between mental health and ergonomics. So this is just a pictorial representation of the statistics as we have already seen earlier, where we can see different cases of the work-related illness. So we have new and long-standing cases of work-related ill health by type 2024 to 2025, where we have 21% of other types of illness, 52% stress, depression, or anxiety, 27% of musculoskeletal disorders. So that tells us that if we don't add some form of duty of care to the way we carry out our jobs, we can't escape from mental health related illnesses in the workplace and also ergonomics related injuries where we have musculoskeletal disorders, back pains, and the rest. So in this session, I don't intend to bore us so much, but we'll be looking at the following: the learning outcome. What do we want to take home at the end of the day? That we've taken out our busy schedule, our time to be here with us. So there has to be something. And then that's what we have in the learning outcome. We have introduction, definitions, the pillars of mental health, the framework of mental health, that's the 5 Ps, domains of ergonomics, aspects of ergonomics, ergonomics factors and mental well-being, examples of impact of ergonomics on mental health. So we're going to see the relationship between ergonomics and mental health when we get to the example. Then ergonomic tips for better mental health and our conclusion. So what do we want to go home with at the end of this presentation? At the end of this presentation, the participants will be able to conduct health survey in the workplace, which is very important. Introduce basic skills in the recognition and control of occupational hazards. Identify unhealthy working conditions or work conditions. And introduce ergonomic exercises in the workplace, because most of the time, sometimes we find out that people go through a lot of issues, personal issues, and those issues affect their performance in their place of work. So you have cases of some people easily having some burnouts, easily getting irritated, and all of that. That's the aspect of mental health. Then you look at the aspect of ergonomics when you look at the layout of the workstation, where somebody is sitting down, the person is not sitting down in a good posture, or the person is not having a good posture. The back is not properly supported while the person is sitting down. The shoulders may be having issues. So by the time you get up, you could have some kind of problems while you're moving and different levels of body pain. So when we talk of our introduction, what are we looking at? Mental health and ergonomics are two peas in a pod that cannot be separated. So when we look at it, no matter how we think about it, you can't separate mental health from ergonomics. They are related. So stress, musculoskeletal issues, and fatigue in the workplace can be increased through poor ergonomic conditions, like poorly designed workstation. Sometimes we realize that while going to work, you're okay before you leave the house, you don't have any issues, you're fine. But by the time you get to your workstation, you sit down for like an hour to 2 hours, you start noticing some kind of body pains or some kind of discomfort. So you have to go back to review the design of your workstation. And most of the time, ignorance of the mental well-being of the workforce leads to increased level of accidents, absenteeism, low employee turnover, high stress, even being, you just notice that you ask your colleague a question, and instead of the person giving you the answer quietly or politely, the person gets irritated and just really shouts at you and tells you that, please stop disturbing me. So how do we now go forward? Proper ergonomics enhances employee well-being by reducing the risk to work-related injuries, thereby eliminating exposure to drained energy level, fatigue, and mood swings. So the promotion of mental health education, training on ergonomic risks, other risk factors, and strategies that will be examined can also help to improve productivity, positive image of the organization, because in everything that we do, the image of the organization is very, very important. And that brings us to the different definitions. So when we talk of what mental health, according to the World Health Organization, it refers to a state of well-being where an individual can realize their own abilities, cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively, and contribute to their community. So it still goes back to our mental state. What is our state? When we look at it, our psychological state, let me put it that way, that yes, psychologically, you are ready to go through the day's activities at work. You know that you are going to be productive in the course of doing the job. So according to the International Ergonomics Association, ergonomics was defined as the scientific discipline concerned with the understanding of interactions among humans and other elements of a system, and the profession that applies theory, principles, data, and methods to design in order to optimize human well-being and overall system of performance. So when we talk of things like that, I always come from the school of thought that your workstation should work for you and not you working for your workstation. Your workstation should be in a state or in a particular condition that you know very well that it's usually very easy for you to just go through what you're doing without so much stress, without so much pressure, without so much disturbance. But now imagine when you have a kind of workstation that for you to even have access to the things you want to work with, you find yourself reaching out so much. You're reaching too far. You're reaching in different directions. So at the end of the day, you go home with a whole lot of pain and the rest, which is not so nice in the workplace. So, and that brings us to well-being. Whenever we think about well-being, what are we looking at? What area are we looking at? According to the World Health Organization, well-being is a state in which an individual realizes their own abilities, can cope with normal life stresses, work productively, and contribute to their community. Because at the end of the day, whatever it is that we're doing, it's always very important that contributing to the activities of the community leads us to greater heights. Let me put it that way. So while we do all of those things and we think of all those areas and the rest, it's also very important for us too to see how we can be in a good state of mind or our well-being is all right before we go ahead with our other activities while we're doing what we're doing. Because when we look at it, at the end of the day, when we go to work and come back, our family is our priority. And just as you want to hit the targets for your employer and the rest, it's also important too that while you're thinking of meeting up the targets of your boss, you should also come from that school of thought that says that your relationship with your family should even improve while you are doing what you are doing. It's very, very important. And that brings us to the pillars of mental health. When we talk about the pillars of mental health, what are we looking at? Where are we going to? We are looking at the physical aspect of mental health, which can improve immune system, reduce stress, boost energy levels, and help to feel more confident. So what do you do to ensure that you keep up with the physical aspect of your mental health? You ensure that you have good nutrition, have an active lifestyle. So in the midst of it, it's not every time you have to drive to work. Sometimes take some walks, some short breaks and the likes, and get enough sleep. Sometimes, because of the nature of what we do and trying to meet up with a lot of targets and all that, a lot of us could be guilty of not having enough sleep. Because you find out that you could tell yourself, oh, I found myself in a place that the network is not so nice, the network is not so friendly. And as the network is not so nice and the network is not so friendly, I have no choice but to see to it that I work later at night when you're supposed to be sleeping. So I hope this aspect of the presentation will help us to change some part of our lifestyle, even me inclusive, because sometimes I'm guilty of that. And that takes us to the mental aspect of mental health. So when we talk of the mental aspect of mental health, what are we looking at? It can enhance the overall well-being of the person, foster resilience, support individuals in leading fulfilling and productive lives. Because you know that when you are able to foster that resilience, there are some things that people could bring to you in the place of work and you'll be able to cope with it. You'll be able to say, oh, well, this is not something that I'm going to break my head on. This is not something that I will kill myself for. I can just go ahead and do what I want to do. And for us to keep the mental aspect of our mental health in check and keep it in good form, we have to make sure that we practice self-care. Sometimes meditation and create a healthy work-life balance. So if you're the kind of person that does your job from 8 to 5 in the morning, then you could now see yourself or look at yourself from the point of view that, okay, after 5 p.m., anything that has to do with the office, I'm not going to involve myself in it. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Anything about the office ends by 5 p.m. After 5 p.m., it's time for my family, and I'm not going to involve myself in anything that has to do with work. Then we'll come to the emotional part, which has a whole lot to do with our well-being and how we interact daily with people too. Because this can lead to greater self-awareness, improve decision-making abilities, and even enhance mental clarity and focus. So what do? We focus on gratitude and cultivating a positive mindset. We need to always have a positive mindset. Dealing with emotional outbursts. Maybe you had an issue with your husband, you had an issue with your wife. You should be able to see how you maneuver and handle that emotional issue without taking it to the office and transferring that aggression to your colleagues. And also, you should be able to manage expectations because it's very, very important. Then we look at the social aspect, which has to do with it can help in improving our social acceptance, community, connection with family and friends, empathy, compassion, and generosity. So while we are working and all that, we should also think of the social aspect of our lives. Like, I remember a time that I was working with an environmental company that at times you could have loads and loads of samples that will come into the lab. And then I used to handle both the physicochemistry and the microbiology analysis. So while you're saying, oh, okay, today is going to be a good day, I'm not going to have any reason to stay beyond the closing time. What do I see myself doing? I now find out that I have samples brought to my workstation in the lab, like 500 samples, and somebody is telling you that we have about 1 week to complete the analysis. And while they're telling you that you have 1 week to complete the analysis, at the same time too, you're looking at how you can meet up with that target. And if it's water samples, maybe you have each water sample is going with about maybe 10 parameters. So how do I now cope? I now find myself working beyond the normal closing time. So closing time is 5 p.m. I see myself working till like 6 p.m., sometimes 6:30 p.m. So by the time I get home, it's almost like how will I even put it? When I get home, most of the time, it's like 7 p.m., 7:30, at times 8 p.m. So social life is gone. And even at the point in time too, I was even having issues with some of my friends because they were like, are you the only person that is working? You're not the only person that is working. Why is it that we don't even get to see you? So by the time you're saying, oh, it's the nature of my job, it's almost like you can't even get people to understand or get them into the way you are living your life and how things are going. And that brings up to the 5 Ps or the framework of mental health. So when we look at the aspect of the framework of mental health, why it's called the 5 Ps? Because we have presenting problem, predisposing factors, precipitating factors, perpetuating factors, and protective factors. So when we now come to the aspect of presenting problems, it just simply refers to concerns that personnel find difficult to manage. And these concerns could include feelings, behaviors, or difficulties in daily life. So those difficulties in daily life, maybe the husband is leaving the house in the morning. While he's stepping out of the house, he doesn't drop enough money for the welfare or feeding money. How is the wife going to go about it? And the wife needs to go to work too. So by the time the wife gets to the office, she's already thinking of what happened between herself and her husband earlier that morning before leaving the house. So that alone can even affect her because she wouldn't know how to manage her feelings in the place of work. And that brings us to predisposing factors, which are biological, environmental, or personality factors that can put the personnel at risk. And some of these factors could be genetics, it could be childhood trauma, it could be family history, or even early life experiences. Like I'll digress a little to a little bit of being this aspect of gender bias. Now, when you have a woman that escaped being raped, and now she has to go for a job. Maybe she escaped being raped while she was a teenager. And that trauma is still in her to the extent that she now has to go out for a job with a man. And in the course of doing that job, it's not something that it's a one-off job. So it's a field job that after the job, you have to go back to the accommodation. Even while she has her own room in the accommodation facility, and the man also has his own room, you will still find out that that woman will not feel comfortable. She'll still be looking at herself from the point of view that, oh, did I lock my door well? Not only thinking of the fact that did she lock her door well, what if this man comes in the name of, oh, he wants to clarify something and he attacks me? What do I do? So things like that are issues that we have to see how we can deal with even before we begin or we get to that aspect of working. Because there are some things that you think, oh, it has gone or it's no more there. But a situation can present itself and you then realize that that trauma still needs to be revisited for you to take care of it adequately. And you have precipitating factors, which are events or triggers that have led to different symptoms like job loss, relationship breakup, or even a stressful event. So maybe you had an issue with your partner before going to work, and the next thing your partner ended up the relationship. And you're at the office and you're occupying a position, a very strategic position that everybody needs your attention to tend to some work responsibilities. What do? By the time you look into it, it will get to a stage that you feel like the pressure is so much, you cannot deal with the pressure again. And you see yourself breaking down because you cannot handle it. So it's always important that we try to deal with a lot of all these factors and all of that so that by the time we get to the work environment, we'll feel better. Then we also have the perpetuating factors, which are things like negative thought patterns. Like when I used to work in the laboratory, when you bring out, for example, something like concentrated hydrochloric acid, yeah, you know that you're putting on your face shield, you're putting on the respirator, you're also putting on the chemical resistant glove. But while you're trying to dispense some of the chemical into a beaker, you could see yourself thinking, oh, what if this pipette falls out of the pipette filler? What will you do? What will happen? Then you could be exposed to some kind of acid burn. That's a negative thought. Then you also have isolation. It gets to a certain stage, you feel like, there's so much and all that. You can't really concentrate. And what? You just see yourself isolating yourself, separating yourself from every other person there. Why? Because there are a lot of things that are just going through your head that even some of them you can't even understand. Then substance use. Substance use, it could not we won't really look at it from the angle of hard drugs. It may even be abuse of something as simple as cough syrup, codeine. You find yourself doing all of that and you tell yourself, oh, by the time I do this, then what happens after I do that is going to help me feel good, feel alive. I'll be able to get the job done. Then you also have some kind of unhelpful behaviors that reinforce or maintain the problem over time. Like in Nigeria, sometimes we have a slang that will say problems are never over. Or in our pidgin English, we'll say wahala no dey finish. So when you look at it, there's never a time that problems end. But the way you manage your problems, the way you deal with your problems is what helps you to go forward and become a better person at doing what you do. And that brings us down to the protective factors. When we look at the protective factors, there are resources, strengths, and support that help to manage difficulties. And these factors could be resilience, coping skills. Like when you talk of coping skills, sometimes I'll say develop a thick skin to some of these things. It's not everything that you should allow to get to you. Develop a thick skin for some of them. When you develop a thick skin, it makes life easier and better for you, and you can go forward with what you're doing. Strong support system or engaging in meaningful activities. Sometimes we don't know or we underrate the strength of support or how our support system helps us. But in the real sense of it, when you have a strong support system helps you to deal with different situations. And not just dealing with different situations, but it will be easier for you to move forward with what you're doing. And when it's easier for you to move forward with what you're doing, you find out that life gets better in what you do. So this just shows us the different relationships between the framework for mental health, or the relationship between the 5 P's. Because when we look at it, one aspect of the P is related to the other aspect of the P. So while looking at this, you find out that the predisposing factors is still related to the precipitating factors or the trigger factors, and now comes down to presenting problem factors, which are usually current or immediate difficulties. Then when you now look at it again, you go down, you see that the perpetuating factors or the maintaining factors are still related to the presenting factors, and it goes down to the protective factors, which still goes back to the presenting factors. So you see that it's a cycle that is so connected, and as the cycle is connected, it keeps going forward. And as the cycle keeps going forward, there's nothing we can do about it, but we just have to see to it that we manage whatever problems that we have. And while we are managing the different problems we have, at the same time too, those problems does not interfere with our other work activities that we're doing. And that brings us to the domains of ergonomics. The domains of ergonomics are simple: physical, cognitive, and organizational. So when we look at physical ergonomics, we are coming down to the psychological and physical interactions between humans and their environment. So most of the time, when we bring about improvements in the physical aspect of ergonomics, it has to do with aspects of posture, body movement, configuration of workstations, and your health in general. Because sometimes you may look at it that, does my workstation actually have an effect on me? It really, really does. I remember when I worked with an organization that my seat wasn't an ergonomic seat. So each time I sit down for long hours, you're typing reports, you're preparing different documents, you're doing a lot of things. And it got to a stage that I started having chest pain. And by the time I got to the hospital to see the doctor The doctor asked a lot of questions, and it now came down to what is the nature of your workstation? What kind of seat do you use? And by the time I described the way the seat was, he said, tell your management that they need to change your seat. And the doctor did not end there. He had to give me a note that they need to change my workstation for me to have a better life. And after that, he gave me some painkillers and told me some exercises to do and the likes. Now, when we look at cognitive ergonomics, it has to do with mental, both intellectual and psychological. So we are not just talking of the now when we talk of the mental part, the cognitive ergonomics, we can now see that it is related to mental health. And I guess some of us that were asking questions on what's the relationship between ergonomics and mental health, we'll be able to see from here that there's actually a relationship between ergonomics and mental health. Then you also have to look at the aspects of human relationship with their environment and activities. It addresses aspects such as performance, decision-making, workflow, error management, and even stress. Now, when we look at all these areas that the cognitive ergonomics will address, that still takes us back to the issue of mental health. And the areas of mental health, or the areas that mental health will address in our different relationships. And last but not the least, organizational ergonomics, which just has to do with structural issues of the work system, which includes organization of processes and regulations. So it addresses aspects such as work schedules, policies, and team organization. So while dealing with both mental health issues, ergonomic issues, organization has to come in. Top management has to come into dealing with all of those things. And that brings us to the different aspects of ergonomics. When we look at the aspects of ergonomics, first of all, we'll have to talk about safety. Safety is very important. So when we look at safety, you have to now look into how the workstation is designed. The design of the workstation, the design of the job. Is it designed in a way to reduce the risk of work-related injuries or illness and pain? And is it in a way that it will prevent hazards like awkward postures, excessive force, and repetition? That's one area that we have to look at. Then we'll now come down to comfort. Is your workstation designed in a way that it minimizes fatigue and discomfort? Does it help you in ensuring that the workspace and job tasks are comfortable? Because when you are looking at it, how am I doing my job? How is the workspace? Is it comfortable? Does it actually give me that area or that access to move the way I am supposed to move? So when you look at all those areas, we'll now start considering tools that can provide comfort, like adjustable seats, the footrest, adequate lighting, and temperature. So when we talk of adjustable seats, I hope you are not going to think of the kind of seats that the person we saw, or the employee we saw earlier in the video. I had his ergonomic seat and he just felt it was a good opportunity for him to relax and really, really relax very well. So does your workstation now provide ease of use? Does it ensure that the tools and equipment are within reach for you? Because most of the time, your tools and equipment should be in a way that you require minimal unnecessary movements. Rather, it's easy for you to use. And that brings us to productivity and performance. So, does your ergonomic tool provide things that simplify your work processes? Does it provide the right tools? And does it minimize non-productive movements while you are carrying out your job? And while you are doing that too, you have to ensure that when you are designing the workspace for the personnel, that workspace that you have designed, should be done in a way that it helps the personnel to work more efficiently and effectively. So while you are thinking of, return of interest, return of investment, more ROI, you should also provide facilities that makes it easy for your employees to carry out their job tasks. And the general aesthetics of the place. Do you ensure that there's an overall work environment that is pleasant? Because most of the time, even when it's not as it's supposed to be, when you provide warnings on some areas of the work environment, those warnings that you provide, is it provided in a way that it's easy to understand? And the safety features too that you provide, you don't just provide the safety features, but you provide it with the tools. So even while you provide the safety features with the tools, it's very important for you to ensure that those tools that you have provided to the workforce are tools that will make the work easier. So you don't just give somebody a work tool, but at the same time too, while you are providing that work tool, provide adequate training on how to make use of that tool so that the person will be comfortable while carrying out the job. So this is just a picture of a proper ergonomic setup where we can see the distance between the eyes and the screen. We look at the shoulders are relaxed. Then the seat provides adequate back support for the person. When you look at the elbow is at the position of 90 to 100 degrees. Then the angle of the hip too is about 90 to 100 degrees. You also look at the height of the chair. It's adjusted to the person's height to the table. Then the feet too are flat on the floor or supported by a pedestal. So if you are in a place that you don't have a pedestal or a foot support, then you can request for. And if you cannot get the one that you have requested for, then you can always improvise to give yourself that adequate foot support. We'll come down to the knee and we'll realize that the knee too is at the angle of 90 to 100 degrees. The wrist, you look at it, the wrist is free in straight line with the forearm. And the keyboard tray is lower than the table, but it's not touching the knees of the person. And the upper frame of the screen is the same as the height of the eyes. So generally, looking at this layout, this workstation layout, if this person sits here to work and the person now has to bring in the 20-20-20 rule for carrying out the job safely, or in ergonomics where you work for 20, you look at the screen for about 20 minutes, then after that, you take a walk, you look away from there for 20 seconds, then you get up from your workstation, you take a break, and you walk around for another 20 minutes. So with this kind of setup and with the 20-20-20 rule, you find out that this person will go home feeling healthier, and the person will not have any form of pains. So when we look at the ergonomic factors and mental well-being, ergonomic factors and mental well-being are two aspects that are interrelated. And as those areas are interrelated, you cannot separate it. As we can see from here, we can see musculoskeletal disorders. As we can see the musculoskeletal disorders that are here, it takes us down to stress. Then when you go down to stress, it still goes down to biomechanical solicitations. Then the work organization, it still goes down to biomechanical solicitations. Then you have the psychosocial factors too. And those psychosocial factors, it still goes down. So you see that everything over here is interwoven. So that's why in the introduction, we heard that mental health and ergonomics are two peas in a pod that cannot be separated from each other, just as we can see here. So when we talk of the ergonomic factors and mental well-being, that brings us down to examining different aspects of ergonomics and how it also affects the mental health. So we look at physical ergonomics, which has to do with your workspace design. What are the factors? It looks at proper posture, adjustable chairs, desks, monitor height, keyboard and mouse placement. And what's the impact of this physical aspect on the mental health? It reduces fatigue, chronic pain, irritability, less frustration, and better focus. So when you work on the physical design of your workspace, or you bring into practice physical ergonomics, on the aspect of mental health, you find out that the employee is more comfortable while he or she is sitting at that workstation to carry out their job. And that brings us down to cognitive ergonomics, which is saddled with the task and information load. And the factors are clear workflow, manageable information, reducing multitasking, appropriate training. So on the lighter note, when we look at it, we can just drop the answer in the chat box. Between men and women, who are the people that multitask more? Do men multitask more than the women, or the women multitask more than the men? So you can just drop your answer in the chat box. And let's see. So we need answers to this question. Who multitasks more? Men or women? Oh, Tony, thank you. So, women more than men. Afrifa, men. Okay, we need two more. We still need two more. Women or men, who multitasks more? Two more. So that we'll have a balance. I wouldn't like to stereotype, so I think it depends on the individual. Oh, women more than men. Rebecca, thank you for that. So when we look at this aspect, we'll see that multitasking, for me personally, someone will say I'm being stereotyped because I'm a woman, but I'll tell you that a woman multitasks more than a man. Because when you bring it to the home front, the woman is the person that takes care of the house. While she's taking care of the house, she's taking care of the kids. While she's taking care of the kids, she still has to take care of her job and all of those things. I remember during the era of COVID-19, where there was a lot of remote work. So you find out that the woman is working from home, but even while the woman is working from home, the woman is not saying because she's working from home, she's not meeting up with her responsibilities as a wife and as a mother in the house. She's still trying her best to see to it that she carries out the task. So on that aspect, bringing it into the work environment, we should try as much as possible to reduce level of multitasking for the workforce. And the mental impact of this is when you're able to clear the workflow, you reduce multitasking, it prevents mental overload. It improves decision making. It makes, because by the time you see that you are not overloaded mentally, it's easier for you to make decisions. It also enhances concentration and reduces mental exhaustion. So, for example, if you are the safety manager of an organization and it's a construction site, in the process of being there, there was an accident, almost a major accident that led to someone almost losing his life. If you are multitasking and all of that, by the time they now bring that report to you, you may not even be able to make the adequate decision to say, oh, call the medics. Okay, let's see how we can administer first aid. While we are administering first aid, call 911 and see how the job can go on. So it's always important to see how we can reduce that mental load, both on the aspect of ergonomics and for mental health. Then organizational ergonomics, which is just our work practices. If you have work practices that enables regular breaks, you have proper workload management, there's a supportive culture, there's a personalized setup. Because when we talk of a personalized setup, for someone with my kind of height, I'm about 5'1" or 5'2", and you now have someone that is about 6'4". Let's think about this. The way you set up my workstation will be quite different from the way you set up the person's workstation. So while the top management is providing all those resources and providing all those things for the personnel, it's also important too that you look at the person. So while you are setting up the workspace or setting up the workstation, look at the person involved so that you would have a proper workstation that would help in improving the person's job and not the person now trying to see how you can work for that workstation to help your job to still go forward. And at the end of the day, you go back home with body pains. So on the mental impact, you find out that there's an emotional balance that is promoted. You'll be able to deal with burnouts. There's also an increased sense of control, and there's a boost in job satisfaction. You will not be like somebody that on a Friday, you're like, oh, thank God it's Friday. We're going to rest. We're going to relax. Then when you now get to Sunday night to Monday, you will now be thinking and be telling yourself, oh, it's Monday. It's Monday. I'm going back to that office. I'm going back to that place. Help, my body is going to pain me today. My body is going to pain me this week. I'm going to have body pains. I'm going to have neck pain. And my wrist is going to, you just be having a lot of complaints. But when the organization is able to provide things to make you comfortable, instead of you thinking so much on Sunday night and almost cursing, you see yourself even being happy that, oh, I'm glad tomorrow is Monday. I'm going to work. I'm going to see my colleagues. I'm going to this. I'm going to that. And that brings us to the environmental factors, which are just lighting, noise levels, air quality, and personal space. And this reminds me of when I went for the job of an ergonomics assessment of an organization. And while we're interacting with the personnel during the interview session, there are some offices that you go into, the temperature is cool. And there are some other offices that you go into, it's warmer. And by the time you ask, they'll tell you, oh, that I had to adjust the AC to see to it that I'm more comfortable in this environment. And you now see some other people in some other offices that will tell you, oh, my colleagues like it cooler. I don't like it so cool. So look at my jacket or look at my sweater. I brought my jacket or I brought my sweater to make me feel more comfortable in this environment. And that brings us down to the mental impact. You find out that poor conditions reduces concentration. So for us in Nigeria, when we look at our temperature that is warmer or hotter, you're working in a place that you need a lot of air conditioning, and your colleague is telling you, oh, it's too cold. Now, you now decide to increase it so that it will be warmer for your colleague, but you're not comfortable. So what are you doing? You're looking for a way to fan yourself. If you're not fanning yourself, maybe you have this other portable hand fan that you're looking for a way to just position it so that you can get the air while you're doing the job that you're doing. And the process of doing all of that, you have a lower level of concentration. Then you find out that there's an increased level of stress because you're not concentrating, you're not feeling comfortable, so your stress level will definitely increase. But you find out that when you have a good work environment, adequate lighting, the noise level is good, the air quality is good, your space is just personalized to you, you realize that you have clearer thinking in that work environment. And that brings us to examples of the impact of ergonomics on mental health. So when we look at the examples of the impact of ergonomics on mental health, now when we look at this image, can we see what's going on? From here, you see eye strain, looking down at the monitor, the person is already tired. Then you look at the way the hand is stretched, arms reaching to the keyboard, ouch, there's already pain there. Look at the position of the neck pain, head forward on spine, another ouch, because the person is experiencing pain. Now the person is leaning back in the chair, another back pain, that's another level of ouch for the person. And you look at the lower back, it's pinched. So the person is already having different levels of pain, and the leg tucked underneath the chair, that's already giving you stiffness of the leg. And that now leads to all these stories of mental workload, which could be distractions, time remaining to complete the task may not be so much. You look at the duration of the task, the uniqueness of the task, repetitiveness of the tasks. You know that sometimes when your job doesn't have that rotation, repetitive tasks alone can even create another form of mental workload for you. Then you have complexity of the task, predictability of the task, pace of the task, because now you have a target to meet, and because of that target that you have to meet, you are looking at it. How fast can I go? How do I go about it? Can I meet up with the target? Then you now have interruptions, and the interruptions can come in from different levels. It's either your boss is giving you more things, or your colleague is asking you for a clarification of something, or you have interruption of even phone calls from home with a whole lot of things. And that now brings us down to value of the task. You're looking at the value of the task. Okay, this task now, is it something I can do at this time or leave it to complete it later? Or do I have to force myself to see how I can go ahead to complete the task? Then there is crowding. So imagine if you now find yourself in a place that in that office where you are operating, you are not the only person working there. You have about 5 or 6 people or even 7 people. It's a large hall, everybody with their different cubicles and all of that. But yet, there's still a crowd. So how do you cope with it? Then coordination. You're looking at your workstation setup, or you're looking at your workspace setup, and you're asking yourself, is this comfortable for me? Can I go ahead with it? Then while you're asking yourself, is it comfortable for me? Can I go ahead with it? Can I do this? Can I do that? You find out that you're now in between. Oh, the file is at this end, or the other table I need to get something from is at the other end. So how do I now coordinate everything? Then you look at switching between tasks. How do you now switch between tasks? Like when I was in the laboratory, you're working in physical chemistry lab, attention is needed in the microbiology lab. You have to go up to the microbiology lab, check what's happening in the microbiology lab, then come back to the physical chemistry lab to come back to continue with what you're doing. So when you look at that switch and all that, how can you now handle all those pressures? Then very importantly, availability of needed resources. Because it's not about trying to meet up, trying to do this, trying to do that. But do you have enough resources to carry out that job task the way it is supposed to be done? So that's another area. Then that takes us back to distractions. From distractions, to time remaining to complete the task, and you see that it's a cycle that goes on and on and on and on and on. But now, when you have improved on the workstation layout, as you have improved on the workstation layout, what do you find yourself doing? From the head, you see that the person is looking straight ahead at the monitor. The person has a clear vision. So you are seeing clearly, you know what you're supposed to do. Then when you look at the wrist, you find out that the wrists are easy, the hand lengthened forward from the elbow. The lower arms, fingers are free. It's easier to type while the person is typing. And the person is comfortable on the floor or footrest. The person has happy feet. Then you look at the knees. The knees are directly forward from the hip joints, and it keeps the back free and allows you to balance your pelvis. So before, ouch, now no pain. And you see that the pelvis is now balanced on the chair and the lower back is open. So no ouch, but instead what do you have? No pain. The elbows are hanging under the shoulders, so there's free movement of your arms. Then you look at the back too. It's long and wide. And also too, the shoulders are wide, so you have free breathing. So your lungs are not constricted, but it's easier for you to breathe. Then the neck is free. You have balanced head on the spine, so it can also help in clearer thinking. And that brings us down to ergonomic tips for better mental health. So when we look at the ergonomic tips generally are focused more on the physical capabilities of ergonomics and the cognitive capabilities of ergonomics. So when we look at the physical capabilities of ergonomics, what do we see? Like we've seen earlier, it's considering the strength of the human body, flexibility, and endurance of that person, ensuring that tasks do not require excessive lifting or repetitive movements that could strain the muscle or the joints. Then the cognitive capabilities or the cognitive ergonomics, as we would want to look at it, it just involves designing the tasks to align with human cognitive abilities, reduce errors and mental fatigues. And just to add to that, while we are designing our work tasks and our jobs, it's also very important that in the process of designing our work tasks and designing our jobs, let us see to it. While we are designing our work tasks and our jobs, it's important for us to see to it that we design our work tasks according to our ability. So you don't have to sit down and say, oh, this person completes his task or her task within a short period of time. I want to complete my task in that same manner. But rather, while you say you want to complete your job task in that same manner, you should be looking at it or thinking of it from the point of view that why don't I carry out this task as my mental health or my mental ability can carry. So we just have a picture here showing us physical versus cognitive. So on the physical part, we have posture. On the cognitive, it affects our sensation. We have muscular, and it also affects our perception. You have circulatory, and it affects the high order of processing things. Then you have movement, and you also have instincts. So still looking at the ergonomic tips for better mental health. In the workplace, for us to be able to see that our job tasks move on well, and at the same time too, while we are working on the ergonomic aspect, it is having a positive impact on our mental health. It's important to prioritize ergonomic assessment to identify areas of improvement through regular assessment of the workstation. Like when I went for the job of ergonomics as an ergonomics assessor, what we did was to look at the layout. We looked at the layout of the office, the environmental factors first, from the lighting to the temperature, then to the setup of that particular workstation where we met the different personnel. We're able to look at all those areas. And after looking at all those areas, we're now able to assess, okay, the ones that their seats needed to be changed, we included it in our report for recommendation to the organization. The ones that needed improved lighting were also stated there. So all of those things through ergonomic assessment also helps in identifying areas of need. Because like we have the PDCA cycle, plan, do, check, and act, you find out that it's a continuous cycle. And just as it's a continuous cycle, there's always room for continuous improvement while we are looking at that. Then organizations should be able to provide adjustable workstations, supportive chairs, and other ergonomic tools to the employees or the personnel through investment in proper equipment. So you're not just saying, we want you to give us more return on investment. We are not just looking at return on investment alone, but now we are also coming down to the aspect of ensuring that you give the person the right tools to provide that kind of return of investment that you are looking for. Then you should ensure that the systems that are provided for the employees prevent physical strain and mental fatigue. And how do you do that? You do that by encouraging regular breaks. So sometimes you could look at yourself, because a lot of us, I'll use myself as an example, I'm guilty of that. Oh, I'm doing a research for a paper presentation. In the process of carrying out that research, I come across some documents. Wow, this thing looks very interesting. And I have told myself that I want to observe the 20-20-20 rule. But because I'm so carried away with what I am looking at, I tell myself, okay, let me just look at this thing. Let me look at it. Just a little, just a little. Okay, let me read a little. By the time I read a little, I will go on break. By the time I read a little, I will go on break. By the time I read a little, I will go on break. At the end of the day, what happens? When I decide to go on break, I will now realize that I have already stayed there for like 2 straight hours to 3 hours. Why? Because, oh, I want to get this. Let me go for that. Yes, I will go on break in a while, but let me just get this. And we find out that a lot of us are guilty of this. So that's why I had to use this as an example. Then, incorporate movements in daily tasks to reduce muscle stiffness and promote better circulation, thereby contributing to overall well-being. Now, when I go for trainings, physical trainings, part of what I do is that if I have 1 hour session with the participants in that class, by the time we've gone through about 20 minutes or 30 minutes, I tell everybody to stand up and we do a little bit of an exercise for like 5 minutes. Or I give everybody 10 minutes walk around break. So that now helps the participants to come back feeling refreshed, and they'll be able to really understand what I am telling them. So now I'm talking as a trainer or as a facilitator. But now, even while we sit down and we carry out our different job tasks, because anyhow we want to look at it, you cannot remove a sedentary lifestyle from it. There's always an aspect of the job that you have to sit down. There's an aspect that you have to look at some things on your either laptop or your desktop. You have things to read, you have things to review. So you can't remove that sedentary aspect. So since you know that you cannot remove that sedentary aspect, it's important for you to now incorporate all those exercises into your work schedule and your work task. And even the top management can even make it a norm that while all the systems are connected through the network, when it is time for break, then all systems immediately go on standby and you have one big write-up, break time or ergonomics break or ergo break or however the top management wants to present it. You can do something like that. And last but not the least, because when you provide a lot of systems and you do not educate the personnel on it, then you have not done an adequate job. So it's always important, educate the personnel or your employees on proper ergonomic practices to empower them and create a healthier environment through proper training. So while you are talking of proper training of everybody in the workplace and they are carrying out all of that, you can also introduce a train the trainer program. So some people at the top, they know what they're supposed to do. They come down to the officers, to other people on the shop floor, and they conduct all those kind of trainings. You could even add that training to your monthly HSE meeting to help in improving the systems or the way of life of the different personnel. So in conclusion, it's very, very important that while we think of improving the ergonomic system in the organization, we should also look at the mental health. And as Mel Robinson said, as I quote, "Your mental health is everything. Prioritize it. Make the time like your life depends on it, because your life actually depends on your mental health." And for ergonomics, always remember, just as Morel Ushiba says, a good stance and posture reflects a proper state of mind. And with this, I have some references here. Thank you very much. I hope I was heard.
Thank you, Becky. Very informative. I just want to pose, mindful of time, just want to pose a couple of questions, if you don't mind, and it's more of a double-barrel question quickly. But do you think that ergonomics are being overlooked following COVID due to people working from home or even possibly hybrid working? And in the same context, do you think that people are possibly working from home or overlooking their ergonomics due to possibly not even wanting to change their home environment too much?
So now, when you look at ergonomics and you're talking of remote working, right? Working
Yes.
from home. Okay. So I would advise that while you wouldn't want to change it, you could create a space at home where you would refer to that place as your workspace. So while you're at home, you know that you go to that place at that particular point in time from maybe 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. It's my work time, in as much as you're within the home environment. So you could create a workspace and know that once I'm out of this workspace, I'm going ahead to face my home responsibilities. So you find out that with that workspace in the house, you will still be able to carry out your job the way you want to carry out your job at home, and you will not lose sight of your other activities at home. So I hope I've answered your question.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. On a final note, I'll say thank you again for obviously taking your time to deliver this for us this evening. We look forward to obviously welcoming possibly you back to speak on something else in the future, and obviously other people associated with the branch in 2026. So thank you again to all that have attended. See you soon. Thank you, Becky.
For having me.